So we are beginning the class Taittiriya Upanishad. So to begin with, just a few words of introduction of Vedas in general, coming down to Taittiriya Upanishads. So now in our India's Hindu spiritual philosophical tradition, there are three fundamental canonical streams. It's called Prasthana-traya or Prasthana-trayi. So Prasthana means a movement or a philosophical system or a spiritual or philosophical heritage. So it's called triple foundations of Indian philosophy and Indian spiritual tradition. They are the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahmasutras. The foundation of the whole system is the Upanishads. And the Gita is only an interpretation of the Upanishads. And Brahmasutra is the third one. It is only logical analysis of the arguments and statements found in the Upanishadic literature. So if you go through the tradition, you find Sruti Prasthanam, which is the Upanishad, that's the Vedas. Smriti Prasthanam, that is Bhagavad Gita, which belongs to Mahabharata. And Nyaya Prasthanam, which is the logical foundation, the logical analysis of the important statements from the Upanishads. Of all these, the Upanishads constitute the base and the foundation. What are these Upanishads? The Upanishads are the last word, the conclusion or the essence of the Vedas. So it's called Vedanta. So Vedanam Anta. Veda, literally it means knowledge. Not intellectual knowledge, but spiritual realization. Knowing or experiencing, being and becoming. That's a real implication of the Sanskrit root from which the word Veda comes with dhatu. So, and it is another meaning is the amnaya, something that teaches you how to live in this world. So, amnayade udishyade dharma anayayidi or anayanaidi amnaya. Like that, there are different definitions of the Vedas or the amnaya. These Vedas were supposed to be or supposed to have been one in the beginning. It is just one corpus. It was edited and classified into 4 groups by one great ancient sage. His name was Vyasa or Badarayana Vyasa. So he got the name Vyasa because he edited, that Vyasa Dhatu means editing, classifying, etc. So the Vedas were originally one. These Vedas were classified into 4 groups by Vyasa, and he taught each one of these groups into one of his 4 disciples. He had 4 disciples, Paila, Vaishambhayana, Jaimini and Bhrigu. That's the meaning here. So Paila was the sage whom he taught Rigveda, and Vaishambhayana learned Yajur-veda from Vyasa. Jaimini learned Samaveda, and another one is called Sumantu, which is a real older name. Sumantu was a sage who learned Atharva Veda from Vyasa. So that's why we have got 4 Vedas now. Rigveda, Yajur-veda, Samaveda and Atharva Veda. Each of these Vedas are attributed to one of these 4 great sages. Paila is the teacher of Rigveda, Vaishambhayana of the Yajur-veda, and Jaimini of the Samaveda, and Sumantu is the teacher of Atharva Veda. Now coming down to the Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya Upanishad actually belongs to Yajur-veda. this Yajur-veda has two divisions, two major divisions. It had only one form in the beginning, but later it developed another alternate version. It is called Vajasane Samhita, and that is another tradition. So I said, there is a little interesting story behind this. So as I mentioned, Vaishambhayana was the great teacher of Yajur-veda. And it so happened that once he was invited to a great assembly of Pandit scholars, and he had promised to attend the discussion, but he could not make it due to some reason or other. He was not able to go. So it amounted to some kind of a disrespect to his great teacher, including Vaishambhayana and other Vedic scholars. So it is called Brahmahatya. Hatya doesn't mean killing. Hatya means some way you try to dishonor a person. It's called Haranakriya. So Vaishambhayana got angry, and the disciple whom he most trusted was Yajnavalkya. So when Vaishambhayana could not make it to the assembly, other sages were angry, and Vaishambhayana tried to reconcile, but he could not do. Then they asked him to perform a kind of penance for this failure to be present in the meeting. So for that he was supposed to perform a kind of Vedic rituals. Now this Vedic ritual was very profound, and what happened, he asked his disciples to perform some yajnas, yagas, penance on his behalf, including him. And among his disciples there was this man called Yajnavalkya. He was the most brilliant among the students. But the problem was he himself considered the most brilliant. So actually he was the most brilliant, but in his own opinion he was the best and most brilliant. So when his teacher Vaishambhayana requested his students, disciples, you perform this ritual as a penance on my behalf, then Yajnavalkya told his teacher, why should you worry about these small fries? I'm alone capable of doing it. I can do it. So Vaishambhayana, the teacher, got angry because he was disrespecting his other disciples. So Vaishambhayana, the teacher, told him, all right, whatever you learn from me, you leave behind and quit the ashrama immediately. So now how do you really leave behind what you have learned? So there is a mythological story which is a symbolic presentation. It seems that Yajnavalkya had to take a vow that he will not make any use of whatever he had learned from his teacher. So that is put in a mythological story. It seems, Yajnavalkya had to vomit out what he learned. That is the original Yajur-veda. So the vomiting out is mentioned. What happened, actually he had to promise that as a punishment, he will forget or will not make use of whatever he learned from his teacher till that moment and leave the ashrama. So the mythological story says he vomited, and other disciples, they took the form of birds called Taittiriya birds, and they ate this vomit. That is the original Yajur-veda that Vaishambhayana taught till that day, and that part of the Vedas came to be known as Krishna-yajur-veda, which is really the Yajur-veda that belongs to Vaishambhayana tradition. So, for example, this Taittiriya Upanishad belongs to that tradition. Upanishad belongs to that tradition. So that is Krishna-yajur-veda. Is Krishna, I mean black in the sense the original. In contrast to this, Another Yajur-veda is there. That's the story. So Yajnavalkya, though he was slightly arrogant, he was a gifted person, and he repented later on for his arrogance. And but you know what he did? He went to a forest, and he started practicing meditation for long years to Lord Surya, the sun god. And the sun god, after a long time, took the form of a Vaji. Vaji means a horse, and appeared before Yajnavalkya and taught him the same Vedic truths but in a different language, actually a much more sublime language, because the great brilliant disciple repented. So God himself, in the form of Surya, the sun god, came and taught him. It came to be known as Vajasaneyi, or it is called Shukla-yajur-veda. And the most important of the 10 Upanishads on which Shankaracharya wrote commentary, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, belongs to that Shukla-yajur-veda. And Yajnavalkya is the most prominent figure in that Brihadaranyaka tradition. So this is the story of Yajur-veda, to which this Taittiriya Upanishad belongs. It's a part of Krishna-yajur-veda, belonging to Vaishambhayana tradition. Now, as I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, every Veda has got 4 divisions. That is Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. So Samhita is the oldest form of Vedic tradition, and the most ancient Samhita is Rigveda Samhita. So if anybody asks you what is the oldest available record of Hindu Vedanta tradition, or maybe in the whole history of religious tradition, that is Rigveda Samhita, because that is the oldest of the Rigveda, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. So a Samhita is nothing but just a digest of hymns, what we call suttas, dedicated to address to different deities: Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Pavamana, Surya, and so on. That is Samhita. So Rigveda Samhita has got more than 10,000 Rig. So Rig itself means a mantra bhaga. It is a verse. The smallest unit of Rigveda Samhita is called Rig. So a number of Rigs coming together is called a Sukta. So altogether the Rigveda has got about more than 1,000 suktas, nearly 11,000 Rig mantras. So Aktimele Purohitam Yajnasya Devam Murticham Kotaram Ratnathatamam. This is the first Rig. It ends with the 190th sutta, that is Yajnavalkya Sutta. So in short, what we have to remember is Rigveda Samhita is the oldest, and it has got 10 mandalas, as I mentioned, nearly 11,000 Rig mantras, divided into more than 1,000 suktas. Some of the suktas are very small, some of them are very long. So the second portion is Brahmana. So Brahmanas are that part of the Vedic literature which explain the way yajnas and yagas are performed, and the mantras to be uttered, and the way Yajna-vedi is performed. It is an intricate calculus and mathematics. The Vedic mathematics, according to traditions, must have emerged as part of the intricate mathematical process that the ancient Aryans must have developed in India, especially when they designed the different altars on which they offer these ahudis to different deities. So Brahmanas explain the mantras to be uttered, and also the way the preparations are to be made and all the technical details. So when they perform the yajnas and yagas, they will be uttering the mantras or the hymns which are mentioned in the Samhita. Aranyakas belong to another tradition. Aranyakas are mostly very complex and very profound hymns, including high philosophical truths. So that's why Aranyakas sometimes form part of the Upanishads also. Mostly revealed sages in forest hermitages. So that's actually belong to Vanaprastha ashrama. Hindu way of life. There are 4 stages. That is Brahmacharya ashrama, Gargastya, Vanaprastha, Sannyasa. So we'll discuss that in the coming. There is an interesting convocation address that the ancient sages used to teach the students when they left their Vedic hermitages after studying the Vedas. So mostly householders used to retire to forest hermitages for spending the rest of their lifetime in meditation in Japa. Mostly retired householders. A large number of the ancient sages were retired householders. Uddalaka and many others, some of them were kings also, like Ashwapati. So many of them were retired householders, used to retire to forest hermitages. Like Sandipani, who was the teacher of Lord Krishna, or this Vasishtha, who again was another kind of... they were sages, but they were retired householders. So they used to spend the rest of lifetime in imparting Vedic tradition to students who came from all over the world, free, without any expenditure. They used to look after the students and teach them. So certain mantras which were composed in the context of this 3rd stage in the life of an householder is called Aranyaka. Many of them belong to Upanishads also, because Upanishads are sometimes found among the Aranyakas. In fact, the Taittiriya Upanishad itself is from Taittiriya Aranyaka. It is the 7th, 8th and 9th chapters of the Taittiriya Aranyaka. It's called Shikshavalli, Brahmanandavalli and Bhruguvalli. So Valli is in a way the broader category, section. So the 4th part of the Vedas were the Upanishads. Upanishads constitute the fundamental, the most important and philosophically and spiritually the most vital portions of the Vedic literature. So rituals are no more relevant beyond India's cultural or geographical context. And the way they used to praise different deities, which we are going to discuss very soon, may not be relevant beyond the particular time. They are relevant, but it could be argued that way. But the Upanishads contain certain fundamental spiritual, universal, philosophical ideas which are relevant for all people of all times, in all cultures, and the Upanishad teachings, they transcend the boundaries of time, space, and culture, nationality, and so on. So that's why one of the great mysteries of European intellectual tradition from 18th century to modern times, still continuing, is whenever Western people like Max Muller, Paul Deussen, Colebrook, Bindenitz, MacDonald, even in American history, 19th century, even Emerson and Thoreau, when they came to know something of the Upanishadic ideas, mostly by reading the Gita, they were struck by the fact, and suddenly they could resonate, they could connect with these higher spiritual ideas. So they practically living in the... Thoreau was traveling from one forest to another forest in mid-19th century America, not a very similar context. But when he read the Gita and when he connected with some of the ideas, of the Upanishads. By reading Gita, he himself could connect with that. So, Max Muller, born in Germany, Indologist, read the Upanishads, became a different person. This happened to many because the Upanishads deal with the fundamental human search for truth, spiritual truth, for liberation. So, that's the most important aspect. It doesn't deal with one particular religion. In a way, it deals with the fundamental human quest for truth, knowledge, and peace, eternal peace, and spiritual happiness and contentment. So that is the importance of the Upanishads. Total we can say there are almost 240 Upanishad names available today, of which 120 Upanishads are already published. 36 Upanishads are the most important because they are mentioned in one of the Upanishads, in the Muktiga Upanishad. Of these 36, 10 Upanishads are the most important. They constitute the essence of Vedanta. They constitute the highest reach of India's philosophical spiritual quest. And there are 10 Upanishads: Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Munda, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitiriya, Chandogya, Brihadarya. There are 10 Upanishads. They became prominent because Shankaracharya in 8th century AD took up the task of writing an interpretation, a commentary on these Upanishads. If Shankaracharya had not written a commentary on the Upanishads, today we won't be discussing anything worthwhile in Indian philosophy. Because many of these Upanishad mantras can be found in the Samhita portions of the Vedas and also in the Aranyakas portions. And some of them were interpreted and explained by great scholars before Shankara, but in their interpretations you don't find any trace of these higher philosophical ideas. Certain words, when they were interpreted by Shankaracharya, became repositories of infinite spiritual wisdom and transcendental reality. And those great ideas were brought to Western world in 19th century by Swami Vivekananda, and the Swamiji gave a new modern interpretation to this ancient Upanishad wisdom. So this is the story of the Upanishad. In Taittiriya Upanishad, as I mentioned, there are 3 vallis. Siksha valli is called Samhita Upanishad. It is called Anuvaka. Anuvaka is the smallest possible unit of the mantra. So in the Siksha valli there are 12 Anuvakas. In the Brahmananda valli 8 Anuvakas. So maybe 9th Anuvakas, and in the Bhrigu valli 10 Anuvakas. So to make it altogether, the total number of Anuvakas will be 31. So altogether in these 3 sections there are 31 Anuvakas, small sections. We don't have time to go through the whole thing, but we'll focus on certain important aspects. Especially the Siksha valli, though it begins with an exposition of a most unlikely subject that may interest us, phonetics, the science of pronunciation. Siksham Vyakya Syamaha Varnasthuraha Matra Belam. So actually what Jimson did to English language in the beginning of 20th century. Daniel Jones wrote English pronunciation, which found RP, received pronunciation. The Vedic sages date around 5th millennium BC. Because the first lesson in the Taittiriya Upanishad is Siksham Vyakyasyamaha. Now we are going to expound the fundamental principles of phonetics. Syllables, long vowels, close vowels, So you find a long discussion of this subject. And then there are certain important lessons which are very relevant to people living in our own times. certain important lessons meant for householders or for all people, but in case anyone may imagine that these teachings are meant for sages living in the comfortable living quarters of the forest hermitages where there is no problem, no competition, no botheration, no responsibility, look after the whole family, nothing, no. Here you find many lessons are relevant to people living in this modern age in a highly complex competitive society where they have to be active and alert and efficient all the time. So that is the essentially the content of the Sikshavalli. Brahmananda begins Brahmavidapnoti Varam, the one who knows Brahman becomes one with Brahman. Bhriguvalli focuses on the spiritual quest of humanity as a whole. So, to begin with, we will begin the Shanti mantra of this one. The Shanti mantra of this particular Upanishad is Sahana Vavadu, Sahana Bhunatu. But one Shanti mantra comes as a part of the text here because Shanno Mitra Samvarinaka. So you find it here. Om Shanno Mitra Samvarunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Kritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmam Avatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti 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 Iti Prathama Anuvaka. So this is the first Anuvaka of Sikshavalli. So in short, this is a prayer. Prayer to different Vedic deities. So you find here Shamno Na, you may know the word no there. Na means asmakam, for us, to us. Sham means mangalam, sukham means. So it's a prayer to Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Vayu, Brihaspati, Indra and so on for Sham. So how do we enjoy this sukham or joy? It is not sukham as we understand in the empirical sense, because sukham or enjoyment is normally understood to be a kind of satisfaction when we get something that we are looking for. It is not that sukham, because that sukham doesn't last long. If something makes us happy because we get it, then when we lose it, we become unhappy. So that kind of sukham or happiness is not really sukham, it is only the absence of its opposite. So a temporary happiness is only a temporary absence of unhappiness. So here the Vedic sages are asking for this Sham. So that is explained in the coming verses. Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Vayu, Brihaspati, Vishnu, Brahman, all these deities, all these devas and devatas are different manifestations of one absolute transcendental reality. It is not polytheism, the belief or worship of, belief in or worship of different deities. It is only a prayer to the omnipresent, transcendental, one supreme truth, which manifests in so many different forms, in so many different ways. So, one deity may give us happiness of, let us say, physical health. See, another deity may give us happiness of mental health. Another deity may give happiness of long life, and so on. But all these deities constitute different manifestations, different expressions of the same spiritual reality. So that's why in the Rigveda mantra, Indram Mitram Varunam Agni Rahu Adho Vyasa Suparno Gurutman Ekam Sat Vipra Bhagudha Vadandi Agnim Yamam Matarishwanamahu. So the reality is one, and that reality is called Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni, etc. But there are certain important prayers here, and there are also certain promises. So, see, you can find Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Asi. Tvam Pratyaksham Brahma Asi. You are the visible Brahman. Pratyaksha means what is within the purview of our aksham, our eyes. So, Brahman cannot be seen, Brahman cannot be heard, Brahman is beyond the empirical tools of perception or understanding. But the same Brahman appears to us as the giver of happiness and contentment through giving long health. So you find Mitra, Varuna, Aryama, Indra, Brihaspati and Vishnu. Let them all give us bliss and welfare. So then there are some important words that you can, Rutam Vadishyami, Satyam Vadishyami, etc. Rutam and Satyam. So Rutam is the ability to understand what we have to do and what we are supposed to do and how we are to do certain things. So Rhythm can be called a kind of spiritual common sense. That's why Shankaracharya's commentary is Rhythm yatha shastram yatha kartavyam buddhu suparinischidam artham tad adhinatva tvam eva vadishyami. The ability, you may read a book, we may do certain things, but unless we have our mind focused on certain values like truth, values, and also a kind of sense of sanctity and sacredness for truth, an urge for what is real, what is genuine, we will not be benefited by any of our actions. So as Shankaracharya says, Yatha Shastram Yatha Kartavyam Buddhu Parinischidam, Suparinischidam. So Buddhi means our intellect, our mind. We may read, we may listen to people, we may do different things, but how we understand and what we understand, and how we apply what we understand in our life, how we make use of our knowledge, our ability to do things, our skills, that wisdom, it is called Rhythm. And that Rhythm is also an expression of Satyam. And practicing that Rhythm in our life is Dharma. So you find these three terms used in the Vedic tradition: Rhythm, Satyam and Dharma. Rhythm and Satyam are often used as synonyms, but Dharma is the way, is the art of applying in our life this unique spiritual common sense. Need not be spiritual. Even in secular life, when we evolve in our own mind an inner mechanism that accepts what is genuine and that leaves out what is not real, that skill is called Rhythm. So I am speaking truth, I am speaking Rhythm, and I am practicing Dharma. Therefore, all these deities, Indra, Saranagar, Brihaspati, Indra, Vishnu, Mitra, all these, let all these deities help me by giving me long life. Each of these deities is considered to be the presiding deity of our different organs of our body and mind. So that is an old Vedic conception where each skill or each part of the Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas is linked to one transcendental divine reality. So that is this the Shanti mantra. Then we will go to another very important lesson, that is that we can come to maybe the 11th Anuvaka of the chapter 11th. This is very closely linked to what I have already explained here. You find it's a convocation address. So you get an idea as to how this Vedic culture was preserved and practiced in the context of not only forest hermitages, but also in the family settings, in social contexts, in different contexts of life. So it is a convocation address. As I mentioned earlier, many of the Vedic teachers were retired householders who lived in hermitages, imparting Vedas to children. So normally a father may be a teacher, but he will not teach his own son, or even if he teaches, he will send his son to another teacher for higher education, even though he himself can finish the education. So every student used to go to some Vedic hermitage. Frequently 12 years of education. And after 12 years of Vedic education, they used to return home. The beginning of that Vedic education called Upanayana, and the conclusion of the education called Sama-avartana. Sama-avartana means coming back to one's home. Upanayana means Upanayatiti. Upa is Upasanidhi, Upasamipe. Upa is a prefix Upasarga in Sanskrit, which implies taking you near or approaching near, going near. So a Vedic teacher will give a formal initiation to the student to Vedic studies. It is called Upanayana. And after 12 years, or maybe it could depend, in the later centuries, it became flexible. After the conclusion of the Vedic education, the students used to retire home. It's called Sama-avartana. So the whole process of life in Vedic times begins quite early in their life. So in fact, some of the samskaras are related to that. I'm not going to those details. But one of the most important samskaras after childbirth was Gayatri Upadesha. And Gayatri Upadesha, Gayatri is the essence of Vedas. Gayatri is the name of the most profound and the most beautiful metrical form. Gayatri is a meter, and because one very important mantra happened to be in the meter, that mantra also got the name Gayatri. Gayantam Trayadedi Gayatri. And Gayatri is a mantra that saves the person, that protects the person, that leads the person to spiritual wisdom, the person who practices the Gayatri mantra. So after the Gayatri mantra Upadesha, the student used to be sent to Vedic hermitage, and then after long instruction, by the time he may be 24 years in many contexts, they used to return home, and returning home, the teacher used to give a set of instructions. Actually, those instructions if you look at the nature of the kind of instructions, it gives a glimpse into the sublime beauty and sanctity and the grandeur of the Vedic way of life. So it begins like this. Vedamanuchyacharyon devasinamanusasti. This is how it begins. So Vedam anuchya acharyaha andevasinam anushasti. After having taught the Vedas, the teacher is advising the student. Andevasinam anushasti. Satyam vada dharmam chara swadhyaya anma pramadaha acharyaya priyam dhanamahritya prajatantum ma vyavachetshihi satyana pramaditavyam dharmana pramaditavyam kushalana pramaditavyam bhutena pramaditavyam swadhyaya parvajanabhyam na pramaditavyam, etc. We will continue that. So, the first instruction, very obvious, speak the truth. That's more or less clear. You can find it in all religious traditions, in all. Also, every father or mother, or grandfather, grandmother, or a teacher will use this. If he doesn't use it, then he is not a teacher. He is not an ideal mother or father. So that is very well understood. Satyam vada. Dharmam chara. You should practice dharma. Now dharma is a very important value in the Vedic tradition. In Taittiriya Upanishad you find it explained here. Dharma. Dharma is the fundamental value. So total there are 4 values. As you know, values mean artha. Arthade idi artha. Artha means, artha is something that you are going to acquire, attain through practicing certain values. So, it's called Purushartha. Purushena arthade iti Purushartha. 4 Purusharthas, 4 fundamental values of human life. Those values are as relevant today as they were relevant in those times. Dharma is actually the most important value. It is more important than moksha. Because without dharma, you won't reach moksha. Moksha means spiritual liberation, spiritual enlightenment. The ultimate spiritual destination is moksha. So moksha, many people may not strive for moksha, may not have an inclination for working for a transcendental value. But dharma is something that is indispensable. Even for secular life, for orderly life, a give and take policy, social adjustment, in family life, in social life, in national life, dharma is very important. Because our normal activities are directed towards acquiring those tools which are necessary to be able to live happily in this world. A student is working hard to get high grade. It's important for him. In fact, it is dharma of a student to work hard and strive for the best result. And it is the dharma of a businessman to make profits. But even the pursuit for making profit should be based on certain dharma. A student, he should work hard. A student who says, well, I won't care for examinations, he's an atharmi actually. He is violating the principles of righteousness and dharma and students' ethics. For him, his religion, his dharma is to get highest possible result. A businessman, you should make profit. So you find in the ancient Vedic sages' books, you find a businessman should make money. Because if he doesn't make money, then how will other people be supported? So I mentioned earlier that these students used to be sent to Vedic hermitages and they used to get free education, Vedic education. Even householders used to supply all that is needed for the teacher living in Vedic hermitages. Kings and householders. They were the ones who used to supply. You find in the Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka Upanishad begins with an interesting discussion. Shagunako Mahasala. Shagunaka is a household, a rich household. He goes to an aged sage, Angira, and asking the question, what is the ultimate truth? What's the absolute reality? But the Shagunaka, the householder who goes to this sage, is called Mahashala. Who is a Mahashala? Mahashala is a rich man who spends a lot of his money for erecting big inns to feed spiritual seekers and pilgrims who assemble in pilgrim centers. Such a man is called Mahashala. So that means, but the ability to think in terms of doing a noble charity when you are rich, it comes only when you acquire your money, your wealth, by practicing the values of dharma. A person who does not practice the values of dharma, when he tries to make money, that person will not part with that money. He'll be a scourge of humanity. Nobody will be benefited by him. So even in order to make use of our knowledge that we study from schools, that we get from schools, the wealth that people produce from business, you need dharma. Because dharma is a regulating principle that should regulate our actions when we strive for acquiring artha, for fulfilling kama. Kama means ambitions, goals, big job, lot of money in the bank, all the children going to Harvard, all getting the best paid job. It is wonderful. Householder has not only the freedom but the responsibility to do this. That's a very interesting thing. You find, if you don't mind, the Gandhian emphasis on cottage industry and fasting, that is not found in the Vedic tradition, unfortunately. It has its great value, no doubt. Gandhi was the greatest man the world has produced. But Vedic culture, Vedic tradition is a very balanced and very modern, very rational. It says a philosopher should be able to write books. A sage should be able to meditate, teach higher things. A businessman should do business. An industrialist should do industry. But should not deviate from the path of dharma. So that is the only important value you find it here. So, in fact, I heard that some of our eminent Swamis in the past had a difference of opinion with Mahatma Gandhi. The only point of difference was Gandhi was not in favor of heavy industry or acquiring wealth for the whole nation. But this great Swami was for heavy industry because Swami Vivekananda expounded a very wonderful ideal, a harmony of the modern industrial West, the best of technology, the best of science, the best of all the great positive gifts of modern science and our traditional spiritual values. So you find that's what you find here, dharma. So you find dharmam chara. The subject, bhutina pramadidavyam, you find the coming verses. It is, you should strive, work hard to acquire enough wealth through dharmic means to do your duty to your parents, to your family, to the society for the preservation of his culture. So that you find in here of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya was an asceti who wandered all over Indian subcontinent. In those days, Afghanistan to Burma, Sri Lanka to Kashmir. And he didn't have anything. It was only one cloth. That man, that Shankaracharya says An householder has a sacred obligation to make money for the good of society. Bhutena Paramaditavya, you find the Bhashya, you find. So, Dharmanchara, Swadhyaya ma pramadaha. So, what's in Swadhyaya na pramadaha? Means, one should never deviate from the path of traditional dedication, traditional reading scripture, reading holy books, which are very important, because of course the other commentators give some very interesting highlights. He says, if you don't read good books, you will end up reading bad books, because you cannot stand in between. So the only way to avoid reading bad books is to go on reading good books. So Swadhyaya na pramadaha, you should not have any deviation, any delusion. I mean, oh, I won't read books, no. So Swadhyaya is what helps us to feed our mind with good spiritual and intellectual food. Okay. Then it continues, like, Acharyaya priyam dhanamahritya prajatantam ma vyavachetsih. So you find there is an ancient tradition that you should, when you learn from a teacher, you should give something in return. The teacher is not a businessman. But if a teacher goes about giving his great teachings to everyone without making that receiver feel the value of what he teaches, it's no use. That's why, I remember in India in olden days, they used to supply the homeopathic medicines, liquid medicines. So there was a homeopathy dispensary near a school. They free. The student used to go and take every day, because it gives you a kind of sensation, Ayurvedic, the homeopathy medicine in a bottle, small glass. But later they insisted you should pay 1 rupee per one. Then they stopped it. So even if you get anything free, the very fact you get it free can cause that you will undervalue it, or you may ignore what you get like that. So every day you get a huge quantity of gold free, the gold will be absolutely of no use. So in ancient times, there was a tradition. This is the historical background. Things have changed these days, of course. The teachers used to impart education free, not only Vedic education. You find the grammar, even the Silicon Valley, even Bharatanatyam, all these Indian classical music, all those things, they were taught in ancient times by great teachers free, really speaking. And at the end of education, these students will give to the teacher, it's called Guru Dakshina. So when you don't give Guru Dakshina, the teacher has no problem. But if the tradition is not there, then no student will attach any value to what he receives free. So in order to make them feel, Guru Dakshina in ancient times, you know what Guru Dakshina was? A student has to go and wander in the forest regions and collect twigs, dry twigs, to be used as fuel for Agni Adhana, for Agnihotra. Every day, morning and evening, they had to do fire sacrifice. So they needed dry twigs called Samit. So Samit Pani. So when a student goes to a forest hermitage, Samit Pani means Samit Pano Yasya Saga, that is the Bahuvrihi Samasa, the grammatical formation. Somebody who holds in his hand Samit. Samit can be a parrot, old, or maybe dry twigs. That is Samit Pani. But you should carry the teacher. That is Guru Dakshina. So you should not walk empty-handed. Gurum va Brahmanam va, there is an ancient statement, you should never go without carrying anything with empty hand. So that's why you find here, Acharyaya priyam dhanam ahritya prajatantum ma vyavachyechi. Not only that, a student should come back home and marry and become an ideal householder. That's why later you find Madhudevo Bhava, Pitudevo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Aditi Devo Bhava. In the coming pages you find an ideal person going to marry and become part of social life should respect the parents, teachers and guests as much as they respect or honor God. That's a hypothetical language. So the point is, this sense of sanctity in family life, to become and to live as an ideal father, bringing up children in ideal manner, or ideal mother, ideal wife or daughter or mother or father, husband and wife, sister and brother, whatever may be your role. For that, it is important that one should stick to the path of dharma. And that dharma, in actual life, it expresses in the form of respecting teachers, respecting parents, doing our duty, and then being an ideal student. So satya na pramadidavyam, dharma na pramadidavyam. It continues. Kushalat na pramadidavyam. Next one is bhute na pramadidavyam. Kushalat. Atmarekshanatha karmanaha na pramadidavyam. Bhashyakara says, a person who has studied the Vedas, going to settle down as a family man, as a member of society, as an ideal citizen of the country, as an ideal human being. So he should be an ideal son or daughter, father or husband or brother, whatever may be. But he should be able to do whatever is needed for his own self-preservation. So that could be in the form of a job. He should be able to defend himself in the context of an adversity. He should not run away from his duties and obligations and challenges. So, you can find a very comprehensive, all-round educational instruction is found in these words. So, that's why bhutena pramadidavyam. You should not neglect the responsibility of making wealth through proper means. That's a very, very important teaching that's given here. So bhuti means prosperity, well-being, but in the supporting commentaries it says one should not deviate, one should not doubt, or one should not be negligent when there is a need to do certain actions for self-preservation, for the welfare of family and society, and the welfare of the country. That's an idea. Okay? You find in certain commentaries a very interesting description of one's obligation in an ascending order. First, you have an obligation to yourself. That's a kushalana paramadevya. Then you have an obligation to all the members of your family. And you have an obligation to society. And you have an obligation to the ancient sages. So you find frequently this is coined in the language of indebtedness, rinam it is called. So you find Rishi Rina, Deva Rina, Nara Rina and so on. What we study from the Vedas or what we study from the great holy scriptures. An householder has a duty to teach his next generation. A teacher has a duty to teach his student. Thereby, he is paying back his indebtedness to his own teacher and also to the great tradition which have preserved this spiritual parampara, as we call heritage, through a succession of teachers and students. So, then of course the next important comes, Deva Pitrakaryabhyam na Pramadidavyam. So, Deva Pitrakaryabhyam. Deva Rina, then, our Rina for our own parents. Departed. Pitru literally it relates to one's father. In a broader sense, through Ubalakshana method, it refers to the whole pedigree, our ancestors, parents on both sides, husband, mother and father, and also their ancestors. We have an obligation to our ancestors, and we have an obligation to the great sages who have preserved this great tradition, and thanks to them, today we are in a position to study and understand it. So how do we pay back? We cannot pay back by giving money. So what you learn, you teach others. So parents should teach the children, and children have an obligation, a responsibility to respect their parents. That's why Madhur Devo Bhava, Pitur Devo Bhava, and Acharya Devo Bhava, because the Acharyas have done their Rishi Rina, their obligation, their teachers, by teaching you. So you have an obligation to acknowledge your indebtedness. If we do not show our acknowledgement, that is our expression of our gratitude to this great line of teachers, then what we learn will not become of absolute usefulness class. Somewhere you may learn a lot, but we try to give a speech, you may forget what you want, what you really want to speak. A great musician who may have insulted all his teachers, he may get a PhD in music, but there will be nobody to learn from him, because his music will not be very effective. He will not be able to remember what he wants to remember. We do not know how this happens, but frequently you find an invisible link, a cause-effect link. Well, this cannot be scientifically proved, but you find when families collapse, societies collapse, because of lack of sense of sanctity, sacredness in the filial relationship, children don't caring for parents, parents don't caring for children, and all of them discarding their own ancestors. What happens? The whole family system collapses. So you find here very interesting, a solid rock of instruction that can be an antidote for many of the modern problems, with a sense of sanctity and sacredness to human relations in the context of family life. That's why you find you go to a temple and do abhisheka, you don't find it says instructions. The instruction is simple. We can practice spirituality without stepping out of our home. We can practice spirituality through our own interaction, through our own near and dear ones, doing our best. By becoming an ideal son, one can please God. By becoming an ideal father, one can please God. You find such stories in the Mahabharata and elsewhere. So now we have interaction for about half an hour. Then we'll continue the discussion in the coming classes. Thank you. Take a lot of time. Yeah.
Just going back to the Shanti mantra I had.
Oh yeah.
Who's Mitra? Which god is he?
Oh, Mitra. Mitra is the god of daytime.
Aruna?
Aknabhimanini it is called. So daytime. Mitra preserves. So at the Vyashti level, Mitra preserves. Mitra helps. Is the god of prana, energy, at the Vyashti level. So the prana, pana, vyano, dana, samana. Each of these pancha pranas has its own transcendental dimension in the form of a deity.
And special prayers are to Lord Vayu here.
Yeah, where?
In this Shanti Mantra,
Yeah.
Lord Vayu has.
Yeah. So Vayu is the goddess of a pancha prana as a whole. Prana, the same prana in different energy formations functions at different levels, activating our metabolism. If you want, tomorrow, of course, I felt that Shankaracharya's commentary very elaborately explains, giving a lot of details. I can do that tomorrow if you want. Shankaracharya commentary is there in the Shanti Mantra. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. A long discussion you find Brihaspati, who is Brahapati, who is Indira, who is Vishnu, etc. But it is a technical thing, so frequently I avoid. Okay, but I can tomorrow I shall describe that. Okay. It is said when you meditate on that particular deity, then your illness of that particular part of the body will be cured.
So, the reason I asked is because all these deities, they are nice to meditate.
Well,
that's, I mean, personally
here all these deities are considered to be different expressions of the same Brahman,
right,
manifesting in so many different ways. Yeah. That's why Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Asi. So all these are visible manifestations, Pratyaksham Brahma, of Brahman. Tomorrow I can explain it. If you
Swamiji, Sri Ramakrishna in some sections of the book discusses with his disciples and says, why are you opening dispensaries? What will that get you? How does that relate to what dharma in this Upanishad talks about as your duty towards society?
Sri Ramakrishna's advice to students, visitors, very often based on the particular individual whom he addresses. He admired the charitable activities of Ishwarachandra Vidyasagar. He admired. Because Ishwarachandra Vidyasagar had no ego as such. But one person who was found to be neglecting his own spiritual practices and was talking about, I shall do this, then Sri Ramakrishna, in the particular context, he must have corrected. Because whatever Vivekananda did was an implementation of Sri Ramakrishna's instructions to him. So Sri Ramakrishna himself was the one, he practiced, he taught this importance of daya, seva, daya. You are doing seva, daya is only another word, but actually it should be seva. Daya, if you use the word daya, your kindness, who are you to be kind to the world? It is a service, not charity. But then it depends upon the persons. Suppose Swamiji brings up this idea. Suppose one person will not do any good to anyone. His beginning of spiritual life may be practice of some charity. But an advanced person who thinks, who has done a lot of charity and he says he has to do nothing more, he has done everything, charity is the end of everything, then Sri Ramakrishna will tell them, that's not enough. Have you done your own duty to your own spirit? You have performed your own spiritual obligations? So Sri Ramakrishna's instructions varied from person to person depending upon their own level of spiritual progress. That's it.
Swamiji, one question. The rishis, they didn't teach their own kids. They sent it to another friend rishi, and I see that too. Why is it like that?
No. The rishis did, actually they did Gayatri Mantra, all that they will do. Only for higher education, they frequently used to send to the hermitages, because a father may not practice the stern discipline that may be required. So in order that he, because of his extreme affection for the child should not suffer. So he should be taught under a teacher who will not have that problem, who will be stern. That's why you find many such Uddalaka. Shwetaketu remained uneducated. When Uddalaka came, he found Shwetaketu had neglected his studies. Uddalaka himself was a great teacher who actually taught him the highest truth. Then he sent him to another teacher. And then he returned after 12 years. Then he found Shwetaketu, the child, the student, had become so arrogant. Then Uddalaka asked him, have you learned what is to be learned? Have you learned that by learning which everything becomes learned? Have you heard that by hearing which everything becomes heard? Then Shwetaketu said, no, I don't know any of those things. Then Uddalaka taught him that, and the Tattwamasi was itself. In the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. So, this is a common practice. Not that they will not teach, they will teach, but maybe for higher education they used to send to other teachers. And again, in the forest hermitages, a number of students used to assemble. And some of them were kings, some of them were emperors, some of them were ordinary people. They all used to assemble. Well-known, so they were well-known forest hermitages. So, frequently parents used to send their children to those well-known teachers. Those teachers were perhaps superior to the father himself, so he was sent. Every householder was not a teacher. The Vanaprastha was not practiced by everyone, but it was an ideal. Many practiced, many did not. So you find throughout the Vedic literature, you find these great teachers, Sandivani, Uddalaka, even Shwetaketu himself became a teacher later on. And great king Ashwapati was a king, Janaka was a king, emperor. Some of them were emperors, great teachers, some of them were sages, some of them were leaving their homes.
Maharaj, I would very much like to hear more examples, if possible, of good students, especially in modern contexts, good disciples or spiritual students, how they should behave, especially in modern context.
In modern context, they should study the scriptures. You know, in ancient times, if you look at the history of Vedic education, it's a Gurukula method, where it was not too systematic, but for that reason it was more effective. There were, you get a glimpse of this, you find historically, from the records of Megasthenes, who was a Greek ambassador to Chandragupta Maurya's court, who lived in India 305, just up 20 years after Alexander's return to Greece. You find it is called Megasthenes. Who he's the first modern recorded book from where you get a glimpse of this was Megasthenes' writing. So students used to do a lot of work in the hermitages, like maybe cooking or bringing the fuel for the fire sacrifices and looking after the whole thing. Looking after cows is important. You find in the Chandogya Upanishad, one student, Satyagama, told his student, he gave him 400 cows, and you return when the number reaches 1,000. So you find the stories, you find. So a lot of work had to be done. In modern context, I would say there are different kinds of, we don't have cows to look after, but different kinds of activities. But because without those activities, no institution or asrama or society can be preserved. Not only that, you'll find if somebody spends all his lifetime to study scriptures without doing any work in the ashrama or monastery as in context, that person will not be able to survive for long. This has happened in many of our, of course it's not proper to say, but in many ashramas, sometimes you find some brahmachari join. We'll study only. Only I came here to study, not for doing. That you get somebody. Then you do it. The point is, when you get something from somebody or some institution, unless you pay back, you become a debtor. When that happens, you become spiritually and psychologically, you become a slave. If you go on taking from somebody without giving, that really brings in a kind of cultural, spiritual, psychological imbecility. You'll be able to preserve your own identity only if you also give something to somebody at the same receiving. Because this give and take is a part of the internal human mechanism. In fact, this applies to nations also. So you find, because I was a student of international relations and political history, as you know that very well. You see, after the Second World War, certain countries that only received help from the United Nations or maybe from USA and other countries did not always receive too much. They did not prosper because they did not develop their own mechanism to develop their own resources. This happens even in the context of national histories, you find, social histories. Nations that always become dependent upon the rich nations of the United Nations. What do you say, Bobby?
Yeah, I agree.
Such nations, they fail to develop their own resources. Self-reliance, they don't. So, what I mean to say, this applies in a much more intense manner to human individual life. If we always, when we get something from somebody, from somewhere, we have to give back something. This is very important. That's how this whole equilibrium may be preserved in the world.
Consistent with that, I'm curious how you view the text itself, the text of this Upanishad and the other ancient texts. Many scholars say that they're fragments. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. They seem to read with a certain integrity. Perhaps they're not fragments, but many of the scholars say that what we receive now are fragments. But in the same sense that you were saying that it's not so good to be simply a taker or a debtor, perhaps if they are fragmentary, this then stimulates the commentaries. You know, the imagination then goes to what can then be added to what has been received. You know, is it your view then that maybe it's very fortunate that if they're fragments or they just plead to be interpreted and to be re-examined and re-expressed? Is it consistent with what you were saying?
Yeah, with regard to modern scholars and modern Indologists, both Indian and Western, I have my own views which I am going to give right now. But before that, I would say the present 11 Upanishads, including Shvedasudara, is the 11th one. The commentary is there, but some people say it's not Shankaracharya. All these Upanishads, they remain in the same form without any change, right from 8th century AD onwards. As for those who give their opinions, you can ask one question. Have they studied any of the scriptures from a great teacher, from a traditional teacher? Then you can criticize the tradition. See, if I learn music, Western music, I can criticize Western music. I don't know anything about Western music, really speaking. So very often, both in modern Indian and Western scholars, they criticize without really making any effort to study these scriptures from the great masters, from the great traditional teachers. That's the main problem, in fact. So, in science and technology, medicine and engineering, you will not seriously consider the views of the person who has not got a degree in engineering and medicine. But on this subject, anyone can say anything So frequently, I tell you, in India, in the Indian philosophical conferences or in the Oriental conferences, they always insist on one original paper. Anyone can present a paper, any recognized scholar, there are tens of thousands. You should be original. So they say multiple authorship of the Mahabharata. You find such things. You can take one little somewhere and then send an article. This happens. You cannot take liberty with Einstein's theory. You can't take liberty from Kantian philosophy. These are already there in books. So very often these views, these are fragmentary, these are interpolations, have absolutely no value. That's the reality. See, my view, how much value will you attach to my view on modern medicine? And I am a person who knows nothing about medicine. If I have an MD from a medical university, then you can say maybe my views are in some respects relevant. But I know nothing about medicine. Like that, people who don't study the scriptures in the traditional way and then they criticize. The point is, you can criticize the tradition, but first you should know what the tradition is. You should know what you criticize. So Shankaracharya wrote his commentaries after studying every single possible source available during his time. Then he wrote this book. The point is. And he is not writing about a subject in which he did not know anything. He only touches those subjects of which he knew everything that is known in those days. So these views are there. In India also you hear a lot of these views. And normally I don't spend much time on this because there are many wonderful, there are great Indian and Western scholars who have so much of reverence, who have dedicated a whole lifetime to study these things. So why bother about other things? Yeah. Now, another thing, can anyone dispute the logic of these instructions? See, for example, you should speak the truth. You should practice certain ethical, spiritual values, even when you acquire money, wealth, secular prosperity. All these are wonderful, they are necessary, but in the process you should have certain values. Can anyone, in his sense, proper sense, dispute the logic of this statement? It is so universal. It is not part of any particular religion. It is a part of pure human common sense, So these ideas put in such a profound language in the Upanishads. We have another question? Yeah. Dr. Card used to ask some very relevant questions every year. Look.
So, I mean, from what you said about Dharma, I mean, it is a matter of gratitude.
Yeah. Especially Runa, indebtedness. Because that cements the tradition, and the preserves the tradition. Yeah.
It was very interesting to me that you went right to the 11th.
Yeah.
And your thought on that was that it's, was it that it links to the opening, or was your thought that it captures something essential for us to launch into the rest?
Yeah. Because that's so relevant, that's so universal. Okay. So we'll continue tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.